Let's see. All right, now we're gonna walk through and let's do let's do an Eric question before things explode. Uh, which one do we like? There's one about Joker. Uh, yeah. Okay, so it's actually a very good question. Eric Blake has one. He says one of the most supremely annoying trends today among online conservatives is the whole "I am proud to say I haven't watched a movie in years. I turn off your TV and read a book." Or, sorry, turn off your TV and read a book. Boycott Hollywood, boycott it all. As a certain miserable lowlife whose name escapes us, of course, points out, that attitude is dangerous to our side if sincere. But my question is it sincere, or is the boycott it all crowd just full of hot air? Um, the 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 conservatives walking out of the pop culture in disgust has allowed us to get into this kind of trouble. Um, and the reason that conservatives walked out on the pop culture is the pop because conservatives, as a general rule, don't know how to make movies, and they never will. It is an entirely different mindset. It's an entirely different skill set. Um, it's one of my favorite things that I've ever said, but it really is fundamentally true. I would rather watch an engineer perform Hamlet than drive over a bridge built by an actor. Uh, and and when I say something like that, it's presumably funny. I think it's funny. It's funny because you immediately understand how different those types are. Watching an electrical engineer do Hamlet would be excruciating, because the kind of person that makes an excellent electrical engineer are people who are so practical and so focused and so, in many ways, so isolated from other people that they live in this little bubble of highly competent technical expertise, and that does not translate well to relating to other people. So they simply don't have the emotional horsepower to do what an actor really needs to do. And a good actor, Joaquin Phoenix, the best actor I've ever seen, certainly. Um, if you asked him to build a bridge, design a bridge, he simply couldn't do it. He doesn't have the intellectual horsepower for it. And what you find is that when you get to the upper levels, where people who are actually making movies and actually making bridges, this divide becomes so wide that it's almost like two different species of people, really. If you were to really take a really top level coding guy, let's say, and ask him to perform a character like Hamlet or something, he simply wouldn't know what to do. In order to make Hamlet come alive, you have to not only be enough in touch with your own emotions, but you also have to be able to have the physical ability to physically manipulate your voice, your eyes, your body, and everything in such a way that you can send that signal out to people, make it count. He doesn't have that ability. It's not there. And it can't be there. He doesn't have the brain. His brain is not wired that way. Same thing for asking Joaquin Phoenix to design a bridge. He could draw a bridge. He could draw a drawbridge, but he couldn't design one, because when it came time to design one, he'd have to start facing questions like, how much tensile strength is there in this steel cable, and how much do I need, and how much do I need for a margin, and how do I calculate it? And at which point he would just go into vapor lock, and that's that. I will say, having knocked actors so much that and the people that the celebrity culture and all of that. But I can tell you that what Joaquin Phoenix, as an example, did in Joker is as hard as what a top level aeronautical engineer who built the engines for SpaceX, built the Merlin engines. It's as hard as that, and it requires that much study and that much effort. But they're very, very separate things. And so, to get to the question, when the pop culture, when the people that make movies start turning out movies that we don't like, as a general rule, we don't have anybody who can counter that. We just don't have the bench depth. We actors, the kind of people who are good actors, who are born to be good actors, have an emotional structure that draws them very powerfully towards progressivism, because progressivism is basically make believe, and it's all about feeling and feeling good, and it doesn't matter if it's real. On some level, this is an insight I just had just speaking about it, but on some level, what you find is that these social justice warriors, well, I guess I've kind of thought of this before, these social justice warriors are people who are so drawn to the emotional side of things that when you look at what they say and how they behave, you realize that everything that they do is the behavior of somebody who's convinced that they're being filmed, that they're the center of a movie about themselves. And all of the things they say and how they say them and the postures and the outrage and all the other stuff is basically predicated on the idea that that somebody is making a movie about my life right now, and this is the appropriate emotional response that I would have to show what my character is like. So it's just pathetic. So we walked away from it because we didn't know how to fight it. But that was a gigantic mistake, because walking away from the pop culture is walking away from America. It's walking away from the American people. Jeremy Boring said I think it was back in 2008, he said, you're looking at Barack Obama and John McCain, and you think, has John McCain ever downloaded anything on the internet? He's almost certainly never downloaded a song onto his iPhone or something. He doesn't have an iPhone. And has he ever gone to a movie? Can you imagine John McCain sitting there watching The Simpsons? The answer is no, but Barack Obama did all of those things. And when Barack Obama would make a Simpsons reference or something like that, he would speak to the American people saying, I'm one of you. I do the same things you do. Of course, he's not one of us, but he's able to speak the language of modern-day America. He knows how to download a tune. He knows how to not only download a tune, he knows how to download all of his speeches, put them onto an iPod, and then give them to the Queen of England as a big, big, big present. But we have an exceedingly thin bench when it comes to people talented enough to make good movies. And on the periphery of this, somewhere in the edges of where this Venn diagrams overlap, you find people who are conservative filmmakers, but they're not very good. And I mean no disrespect by this term, but I've seen a number of church movies, feature films that were made by churches in order to spread a good message, and they're message movies, and nobody will go and see them because nobody wants to go to a movie to get a message. Nobody goes to a movie to get a message. People go to a movie to be entertained, to have fun, or have a scare or whatever. And very, very few conservatives know how to do that. I know how to do it. And my life has been this strange, bizarre intersection of the actor and the engineer, and that's my perspective on things. That is, to the degree that it's interesting, that's why it's interesting. It's because I understand the engineering world well enough, and I've got enough of the acting world in me to be able to emotionally connect to an audience and take them to the world of engineers that they normally wouldn't have access to. So anyway, the question is now, what do we do about it? The good news is, as I started this whole thing with, I had thought that the ability to control the media, the news media, meant the ability to control the minds of Americans, and I was right about that. And I thought that the ability to control the movies was the ability to control the hearts of America. And I was wrong about that, but I was wrong about it for the right, or I was right about it for the wrong reasons. Owning the news media affects how people think in this country. Owning the ability to produce movies that people want to see could have changed the hearts of those people. And at the same time, it never would have happened or could have happened, which gets to the main point here. And that is how all entertainment is conservative. And this is something we've discussed many times on the show. I'm not going to retread this ground too heavily. But the left had the ability to make a number of films. Now, I don't mean special films. I mean owning the pop culture for 20, 30, 40 years. They had the ability to make films that would substitute the values that we believe in for their values. And they did this quite well for quite a long time. But in the last 5 or 6 years, probably going back to the Iraq War movies, things like Redacted and, Valley of Bekaa or whatever. When they started making message movies, they went too far. And now I realize that they can't help but go too far. They are laying waste to the cultural landscape, and the people who live in the cultural landscape are angry at them, not at conservatives. And yet there's this giant gaping hole where this pop culture used to be. And the left will not be able to fill it because it is the nature of the left to use every single one of these art forms, movies, cinema, did I say cinema? Sorry. Movies, TV, radio, all, art, all of it. And they have to use it didactically rather than mimetically. So I did get something for my college education in theater. I got to understand the difference between didactic and mimetic. Mimetic means performance for the sake of the performance, for the sake of the emotion. Didactic means that it is using an art form in order to do something, to make a point. And the left just can't help themselves. So they're forcing their ideology into places where it can't go. And the beautiful thing about this, and this is why I'm so confident now, I'm so much more confident than I was 6 months ago and much more confident than I was a year before that. It's not that they're making mistakes. It's that they cannot square the circle. They can't. They cannot square the circle. They cannot make movies about collectivists because stories don't work that way. We're wired for that. It just is not possible. They cannot get their ideology into movies, and when they didn't try, they were succeeding. But now they're so completely rabid that if the film has anything like anything against their current agenda, then that film will try to be destroyed. They tried to make that Joker, by the way. They tried to make Joker. They try to make people not go see it. Oh, it's very, very violent. There's graphic violence in the Joker, the kind of which I've never seen before. There's a gunshot scene in there that's going to just make you vomit, and you're just going to leave the. No, I mean, there's some graphic violence in Joker, but it's not an hour of graphic violence like there is in John Wick or something like that. They just were really scared of that movie. They're scared of it because it told a story about a person who was emotionally upset because society had broken him, and because he was broken, he went out and committed these horrific crimes. And that's what happens when you get to these real shootings. When you get to the actual school shootings, you find that it's not a person who happened to be walking down an aisle and an AR-15 was in a closet, and the AR-15 called out to them, and they turned away from their life of being a church going person to suddenly shoot people up because the gun happened to be there. This movie shows that the people who commit acts of horrible violence are people who are emotionally very disturbed, and that alone is so self-obvious that the left simply won't accept it. If you say you have to be mentally ill to massacre 50 people, the left will say, how can you say such a thing? That impugns people who have mental illness. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. No. all Chinese are Asians, but not all Asians are Chinese. No, it doesn't work that way. Of course you're mentally ill. And of course that's the problem. That doesn't mean that other mentally ill people are automatically murderers. This is second grade logic here. Come on. Stop acting like you don't know what you're talking about. It's ridiculous. It's an absurd assumption, but that's what they're doing. So they can't win. They try to make a character who America will despise because he's a racist, and they end up making Archie Bunker, who everybody loved, because Archie Bunker is Archie. They didn't love Archie Bunker for his racism. They loved him for the fact that he was paying the bills for Mike Stivic. And the same thing with Parks and Recreation, with Ron Swanson, who is, in my mind, the greatest character I've ever seen on TV. Ron Swanson, to me, is the greatest character on TV I have ever seen. And the actor is extremely liberal, but the people writing him wrote him as a libertarian, and they would make him do things that they thought would make people sneer and stuff. But that's not what happened. They loved him for it. You know, he goes to this Whole Foods kind of a store, and the guy is some soy boy is handing out 100% vegan bacon strips, no meat in it whatsoever, and Ron said, "Would you like to try one?" The soy boy says, and Ron says, "Yes, please," and he hands it to him, and he just throws it in the garbage. He says, "Oh, thank you. Can I have another?" And he hands him another one, throws that in the garbage. And he says, "Sir, is there a problem?" Ron Swanson says, "Yes, I'm trying to make sure that no one has to ever eat this thing that you're doing." "Well, I can't give you another one." So then his assistant April says, "Can I have one?" She gives one. She throws it in the garbage. It's brilliant. And Jack and 30 Rock and so on. Yeah, you had me at Meat Tornado. Ron Swanson is a great character. And Ron Swanson is a great character because no matter how liberal you are, you know he's right. And this is the thing. Same thing with Archie Bunker. Same thing with Alec Baldwin. They write these cartoon conservatives, and they write them in such a way to make them what they think into buffoons. But some part of them comes out, and they're always right. They're saying things. How can he say it? But he's right. Everybody knows he's right. And they're brilliant, brilliant. Ron Swanson is a big guy who loves to eat the kind of food that progressives think are fatal. And Ron Swanson comes right out and says so. Look, the whole purpose of America is that if you want to eat nothing but cheeseburgers and get to be 400 pounds and die of a heart attack at 42, that's why the country's here. That's why we're here, is so you have the opportunity to do that. It's brilliant. And they can't escape it. This is the thing that's got me so optimistic. They cannot use their tremendous talents in terms of influencing people's hearts. They cannot overcome the biology barrier. They cannot do it. They cannot make Pajama Boy into the kind of character that women want to sleep with. It's not possible. And it doesn't matter. Yeah, Denny Crane is another great example Eric mentioned there. They can't do it. It's not possible. And they know it. So they're stuck. And the reason they've gone as far as they've gone is because we don't have an answer. We didn't turn this generation of millennials into conservatives. They're not conservatives, but they're sure as hell not liberals anymore. And so now there sits all of this it's not even low-hanging fruit. It's on the ground. Somebody needs to go and pick it up. And the way you pick it up is by telling the truth, just openly telling the truth. And it comes down to things like, physical combat. It's like, I really have often thought, in fact, I run the scenario in my mind so many times, I keep coming back to the same thing. It's like, I want to take the best tennis player in the world, and male tennis player, and have him play the best female tennis player in the world. And I've got to find a way to convince this guy that he's got to put everything he's got into it and not back off and not ease up. Because a number of those examples would break this fundamental lie that they tell. Saying that women are not as fast or as strong as men is not saying women are not as good as men, and it's not saying that women can't do patriotic things, and it's not saying any of that stuff. It's just stating what's obvious. And when the left tries to tell you, no, that what you see with your own eyes isn't true, then people know they're being lied to, and they reject it, and they can't get around this. They're stuck with it. they're stuck with it. I thought a good example, by the way, of kind of the balance, patriotism balance, the warrior balance, and stuff with men and women that was handled very well was, I thought, in O Dark 30, where the guys who were going to go in and get Osama bin Laden were big, strong men. And the guys that got the information that got us bin Laden were big, strong men who were willing to do nasty, nasty things. And the woman in the movie didn't beat up the guy, and she sure as hell didn't go on the raid. But she was the one who was able to put the pieces together. And there's a moment that I think captures my view of women in movies as heroes in action movies. And that is towards the end of O Dark 30, where they're talking to the SEAL team that's going to go in, and they don't know whether he's there. They don't really know at all. And these are big guys, and they're not easy to get along with. They're not, they're not approachable guys. They're professional killers. And they're good men. And towards the end of that movie, you've got a couple of these SEALs saying, "Oh man, this is just another false alarm. Are you really serious? Do you really think this is going to do it?" And he says, "Yeah, I do." I said, "Well, what makes you think that?" And then this guy looks over and says, "Because she believes it." And I thought, that is perfect. She's an intelligence operative. And she has earned credibility with these guys. And she doesn't have to go on the mission and kick doors down. She can let the actual big, strong guys who do this, and she contributes, if not as much as everybody, then more than everybody, to getting this bad guy, because she did what she's good at, and the movie didn't lie to us and didn't force something down our throats. It showed that this woman was as patriotic and as essential to killing Osama bin Laden as anybody in the loop, but it didn't make us have to swallow utter nonsense. And that's the balance that should be achieved. And by the way, that character in O Dark 30 does more for women empowerment than 100,000 Captain Marvel movies do. Because if you think that the way to empower women is to convince them that they can beat up a 200-pound athlete, then you're really messed up emotionally. The way you empower women is to show them doing the things that they can do, and doing them well, and having them do them better than the men, and having the men respect the fact that they're doing it better than them. It's not so hard. They just can't do it. They just can't. There's something about these modern progressives that have been making movies for 2 or 3 years now. It's not a very long structure, but they're going to look back on this period as the period of female fantasy films and just catastrophe films. They've got to be able to, for the left today, Natalie Portman has to be able to beat up, what's his first name, Batista. She weighs a quarter of what he weighs, if that. She's got to be able to physically beat him up, or else these people are unhappy. And so this is where they're stuck, and this is why they won't win. They can't win. They cannot win. They can't get over it. They can't beat it. They're done. They're over. People have had enough. We've passed peak progressivism, and now people are sick of it, and they're getting more sick of it every single day. And the more they go in to try and convince people that they're right, the more people begin to hate them. So there we go.